Commander Elena Reyes stood before the Galactic Conclave, acutely aware of the sweat beading on her forehead, despite the climate controls in her suit. The 17 most advanced species in the known universe stared down at her from their elevated platforms, some with multiple eyes, others with sensory organs humans couldn't comprehend. The silence in the vast chamber pressed against her eardrums like physical pressure. She was the first human representative ever to enter the Hall of Eternal Accord, carved from the core of a neutron star fragment. The material itself seemed to hum with ancient power, refracting light in ways that made her eyes water if she looked too long at any one spot. Human. The Vorsic ambassador's voice resonated oddly in the chamber. You understand the purpose of this gathering. The entity seemed to shift between insectoid and avian forms as it moved, a visual distortion Elena had been warned about, but still found unsettling. Its chitinous exoskeleton gleamed with embedded technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. I do, she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. I am here to negotiate humanity's first interstellar treaty with the Conclave, to secure faster-than-light technology access for Earth. The massive view screens floating around the chamber displayed images of Earth, blue and green, and achingly vulnerable when viewed from this distance, over 300 light-years from home. And you understand how oaths are sealed in this chamber? The Medusan representative asked, its tentacles undulating in what Elena had learned was a gesture of skepticism. I do, she answered again. When the Vorsic ambassador approached with the sacred oath crystal, gasps echoed through the chamber. The artifact was legendary, a crystalline structure that somehow interfaced directly with neural pathways of any sentient being. It killed any entity who broke an oath sworn upon it, liquefying their neural pathways instantly. No species had ever violated a conclave oath because of it. The conclave delegates leaned forward. They expected her to negotiate protective terms or time limitations as all species did. Standard practice was to swear to uphold treaty obligations for no more than a century, with numerous clauses allowing for renegotiation. Instead, Elena took the crystal in her bare hands, its surface burning her skin on contact. The pain was immediate and intense, but she refused to flinch. I, Commander Elena Reyes, representing humanity and Earth, swear upon this crystal and bind our species to uphold all treaty obligations with the Galactic Conclave for 1,000 years. The words hung in the air as the delegates stirred in disbelief. 1,000 years, 10 times longer than any species had dared promise. As the crystal bonded with her neural patterns, analyzing her sincerity and capacity for commitment, it began to glow with unprecedented brilliance. The light pulsed in time with her heartbeat, growing brighter until the delegates had to shield their sensory organs. Impossible, whispered the Medusan representative, its tentacles writhing in agitation. Their brains should not be capable of such commitment. But Elena stood firm, even as a trickle of blood ran from her nose, the first hint that humans processed oath-making differently than any species the Conclave had encountered. The neural bond was taxing her system in ways their scientists hadn't predicted. The oath is accepted, the Vorsic announced finally, its voice carrying a note of surprise. Humanity is bound to the Conclave, and we to them, for 1,000 Earth years. As the crystal dimmed and the formal ceremony concluded, the thorax delegate, a crystalline being rarely given to communication with younger species, approached Elena privately. Your oath pattern is unique in our records. It communicated directly into her mind. Other species negotiate contingencies. Other species implant neural safeguards. Why did you not? Elena wiped the blood from her upper lip with a cloth, her hand slightly trembling now that the ceremony was complete. The headache building behind her eyes suggested the neural bonding had taken a physical toll. Where I come from, she said simply, your word is your bond. If humanity says we will do something, we mean it. The thorax emitted a harmonic that translated roughly as deep puzzlement. But you will die long before this oath concludes. How can you bind those not yet born? Elena smiled, despite her exhaustion. Because integrity isn't just about what's convenient now. It's about building something that lasts. If we want to be among the stars, we have to think in timescales beyond our individual lives. As she returned to the Earth vessel waiting in the docking bay, Alina didn't know that her neural scans were being distributed among the conclave scientists with urgent priority tags. She didn't know that her casual commitment to intergenerational integrity would become the subject of 1,000 dissertations on comparative synapsecology. She knew only that she had secured humanity's place among the stars with nothing more than a promise, and the inexplicable human willingness to keep it. 50 years after Commander Reyes had sworn humanity's oath, Admiral Ji Chen stood at the viewport of the UES Prometheus, watching the lights of New Shanghai Colony glitter against the night side of Proxima Centauri. The treaty had transformed human civilization. 12 star systems now hosted thriving colonies, their combined population approaching 15 billion souls. Faster-than-light travel had become commonplace, and trade with alien civilizations had elevated Earth's technology by centuries. Chen had been just 22 when he'd served as Alina Reyes' translator at the Conclave. Now his hair was gray, his face lined with the responsibilities of commanding Earth's defense fleet. But the oath remained as binding as ever. Hundreds of human representatives had reaffirmed it annually in the 5 decades since, each experiencing the same neural bonding, each emerging with the same nosebleeds and headaches that puzzled conclave physicians. "Admiral," his aide's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Priority transmission from Outpost Theta. Captain Rice says it's urgent." Captain Maya Rice, Alina's granddaughter and Chen's goddaughter, commanded Earth's furthest listening post. That she would break communications protocol suggested something serious. In his private quarters, Chen accepted the transmission. Maya's face appeared, tense and drawn. "We have a situation," she said without preamble. "A Xathari scout ship entered our space 2 hours ago, damaged and venting atmosphere. We rescued the sole survivor before the vessel lost structural integrity. He claims to be a defector." The Xathari were among the most powerful conclave members, notoriously territorial, and dismissive of younger species like humanity. "What does he want?" Chen asked. "To show us this." Maya's image was replaced by grainy footage. Xathari warships in a system Chen didn't recognize, offloading massive cylindrical objects to primitive vessels marked with the insignia of the Krell, a pre-spaceflight species. "Are those what I think they are?" Chen whispered. "Planet killers," Maya confirmed when her face reappeared. "Prohibited under Article 7 of the Conclave Charter. The defector claims that Xathari have been supplying them to the Krell for use against their neighboring systems." "Why would they risk violating their oath?" Chen asked, more to himself than to Maya. "He's dying from radiation exposure," Maya replied. "But he said something strange before losing consciousness. Ask them about the implants." 4 days later, Chen stood in an emergency session of the conclave, the footage playing on the massive screens around the Hall of Eternal Accord. The Xathari ambassador, a towering figure with iridescent scales and multiple limbs ending in precision manipulators, watched impassively. "These accusations are beneath response," the ambassador said when the footage concluded. "The human recording is obviously fabricated. We verified its authenticity," Chen insisted. "And your defector's ship contained radiation signatures consistent with planet-killer weapons." "Defector?" The Xathari's mouthparts clicked in what passed for laughter. "More likely a mental defective. A shame you couldn't save him for questioning." Something in the ambassador's tone made Chen ask, "What about the implants?" The chamber grew utterly silent. The Xathari ambassador stared at Chen for a long moment before his face split in a terrifying approximation of a smile. With one fluid motion, he reached behind his cranial plate and removed a small glittering device. "Did you truly believe," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "that any evolved species would handicap themselves with primitive concepts like honor?" He held the device up for all to see, a neural implant that severed the connection between conscious intent and the oath crystal's psychic bonding. Only humans are foolish enough to bind themselves without protection, he mocked. The chamber erupted as 6 other species representatives revealed similar countermeasures, their carefully maintained facade of integrity collapsing. The Vorsic elders vibrated with fury. As keepers of conclave law, they had been betrayed most personally. That night, as the conclave remained in emergency session debating sanctions, Chen received a transmission in his temporary quarters. The colonial governor of New Eden appeared, her face bloodied, alarms blaring in the background. "We're under attack," she gasped. Xathari dropships everywhere. They're targeting schools first, residential areas. Weapons fire sounded, and she ducked momentarily. "They're saying humanity's adherence to oaths makes us unpredictable, makes us dangerous." Behind her, civilians ran screaming from plasma blasts. A child wailed, clutching a stuffed animal as medical personnel hurried past. "Admiral, we need." The transmission cut to static. Chen tried to reestablish contact, his fingers trembling with rage and horror. Nothing. He punched through to Earth Command, requesting immediate deployment of the defense fleet. Too late, he knew. New Eden was 12 light hours from the nearest military response force. By dawn, 3 human colonies lay in ruins. Millions dead. The Xathari had made a strategic calculation. With their neural safeguards exposed, humanity, with its genuine oath-keeping and rapidly expanding presence, represented the greatest threat to their ambitions in the long term. Better to strike now, while the conclave remained paralyzed by the revelation of widespread oath-breaking. When Chen returned to the conclave chamber, he found it embroiled in procedural debates. The Medusan representative was arguing that intervention required unanimous consent under subsection 12G of the Charter. "Millions of humans are dead," Chen interrupted, his voice carrying through the chamber. "While you debate procedure." "Regrettable," the Medusan conceded. "But the Charter is clear. The Charter is built on oaths that most of you never intended to keep." Chen snapped. "You've rendered it meaningless." As he stormed out, the Vorsic ambassador followed him into the corridor. "Not all of us used implants," the ancient being said quietly. "Some of us believe in the principle, if not always the practice, of integrity." "Belief without action is just wishful thinking," Chen replied, grief hardening into resolve. "Humanity will defend itself, with or without conclave support. The Xathari fleet outnumbers yours 10-1, the Vorsic noted. Chen's smile was grim. "Then we'll have to find advantages beyond mere numbers." As he headed for his ship, Chen didn't know that across human space, scientists were already working on possibilities that would redefine the nature of warfare. He didn't know that humanity's greatest weapon would come not from technology, but from the very oath-keeping capacity the Xathari found so threatening. He knew only that the age of naivety had ended for humanity, and the age of righteous fury had begun. Dr. Anika Sharma hadn't slept in 4 days. Her research station orbited a pulsar, using the regular radiation bursts to power her experiments on the sacred oath crystals. The station's artificial gravity flickered occasionally as power surged through the collectors, making her stomach lurch. Her eyes burned from staring at neural scan readouts, and her hands shook from too much stimulant T. When news of the Xathari attacks reached the station, half her research team had requested emergency leave to check on family in the colonies. Anika had stayed, driving herself harder, following an intuition that had been building for months. "Look at this pattern," she murmured to her remaining assistant, pointing to a quantum resonance scan. "When a human bonds with the crystal, these pathways activate differently than in other species." "Differently how?" the assistant asked, peering at the holographic display. "It's like..." Anika searched for the metaphor. "Other species form a single, strong connection with the crystal. Humans form thousands of smaller, interwoven connections." She zoomed in on the scan, highlighting a neural cluster. "This region governs communal identity, the sense of belonging to something larger than oneself. It lights up during oath-taking for humans, but remains dormant in other species. The assistant frowned. What does that mean? Annika's reply was interrupted by an emergency alert. The orbital station's defensive systems activated automatically as unidentified ships appeared at the edge of their sensor range. The alert resolved. Tathari vessels on an intercept course. They're targeting research stations now, the assistant whispered. But Annika barely heard, staring at the neural scans with sudden, desperate inspiration. The crystals weren't just psychic lie detectors. They were quantum entanglement nodes. "Get me Admiral Chen," she demanded, hands flying over the communication console. "Priority channel, authentication, Sharma Theta 9. When Chen's face appeared on the screen, exhaustion evident in the shadows beneath his eyes, Annika spoke rapidly, words tumbling out between gulps of cold stimulant tea. "The crystals amplify neural patterns across spacetime. That's why they kill oathbreakers. But human brains form different connections when we make promises." She forwarded her scans to his terminal. "We don't just make individual commitments. We neurologically connect to our social group, our species. If enough humans took synchronized oaths." Chen grasped the implication immediately. A network effect. "Theoretically," Annika nodded. "A psychic network, bound by shared intent." "What would we need?" "Crystal fragments, microscopic would work, and 1,000,000 volunteers, minimum." Chen glanced off-screen, speaking quietly to an aide. "And what exactly could this network do?" Annika hesitated. "I don't know. This is untested. But oath energy affects reality at the quantum level, with enough humans channeling it simultaneously. We'll use it to protect civilians," Chen decided. "That's what we can all agree on, regardless of political differences." 3 hours later, Chen issued an emergency broadcast to all human settlements. His message was simple. Earth needed 1,000,000 volunteers willing to bind themselves to a battle oath. The response overwhelmed communication networks. 1.7 million humans stepped forward within the first day. Military transports rushed microscopic crystal fragments to distribution centers across human space. Each volunteer received a sliver no larger than a grain of sand, embedded in a skin patch worn over the heart. As preparations continued, Sathari warships began bombardment of Mars colony. The orbital defense grid fought back valiantly, but was systematically disabled by the superior Sathari technology. Ground forces established perimeters around evacuation centers, knowing they were outmatched but determined to buy time for civilians to reach the shelters. At precisely 300 hours Universal Time, volunteers across human space applied their crystal patches and spoke the words that Dr. Sharma had carefully crafted. "I will defend the innocent with my last breath." The effect was instantaneous and inexplicable. On Mars, Zathari targeting systems failed whenever locked onto civilian populations. Their baffled commanders watched as weapons fire veered off course, shields flickered specifically around evacuation ships, and communication signals scrambled when issuing orders to fire on non-combatants. In orbit around the pulsar, Annika monitored quantum fluctuations as they spiked beyond anything her instruments could measure. The volunteers reported strange sensations, a warm glow spreading from the crystal fragments, a sense of connection to millions of others, and most strangely, an awareness of threatened civilians that transcended normal perception. "I could feel them," one volunteer in New Zealand reported. "A family hiding in a basement on Mars. I knew exactly where they were, how frightened their children were. And somehow, I knew that Sathari couldn't find them." Across human space, volunteers stood with eyes glowing with crystalline light, their collective promise creating a phenomenon never before witnessed in the galaxy. A psychic shield formed not from technology, but from shared human commitment. The Exathari fleet commanders reported the phenomenon to their high command in confused, fragmented transmissions. Their weapons could still destroy infrastructure, military targets, even adult civilians who weren't in evacuation zones. But children, medical facilities, evacuation ships, these proved mysteriously immune to their attacks. "It's as if their oath has manifested physically," one Sathari scientist theorized. They'd weaponized integrity itself. In her research station, Annika watched the data streams with a mixture of awe and scientific fascination. The quantum entanglement between oath-takers had created a field effect that somehow identified threatened innocence and diverted harmful intent. It defied every known law of physics, yet the evidence was undeniable. "How is this possible?" her assistant whispered, watching the Xathari fleet on long-range sensors as they adjusted their attack patterns, trying to circumvent the mysterious protection. "Because we meant it," Annika said simply. "When humans make a promise, we mean it differently than other species. We tie it to our identity, our sense of self. Breaking an oath feels like breaking ourselves." As reports flooded in from other settlements under attack, a pattern emerged. The Oath network couldn't prevent all casualties, but it drastically reduced civilian deaths. The Xathari offensive had stalled in confusion, their carefully planned extermination campaign thrown into disarray by a form of defense they couldn't analyze or counter. Admiral Chen contacted Annika from his command ship, his expression showing the first hint of hope in days. "We've bought ourselves time," he said, "but the Xathari are adaptive. They'll find workarounds eventually." "We need to understand this better," Annika agreed. "The Oath network is more powerful than I anticipated, but we're only scratching the surface of what it might do." Neither of them realized that news of humanity's unprecedented defense mechanism was already spreading through conclave channels, attracting the attention of species far older and more mysterious than the Xathari, species that had watched human oath-keeping with growing interest for decades. Admiral Chen operated from a stealth command ship that changed position every 6 hours to avoid Xathari detection. 3 weeks had passed since the implementation of Dr. Sharma's Oath network. While it had prevented the wholesale slaughter of human civilians, the Xathari fleets still held position around major human settlements, adapting their tactics to target infrastructure and military assets that weren't covered by the psychic protection. "They're playing the long game now," Chen told his war council, "starting us out instead of direct assault." A holographic displays showed the blockades around Earth, Mars, and the larger colonies. Supply lines were stretched beyond breaking point, and estimates suggested food shortages would become critical within a month. As the council debated options, Chen's communications officer interrupted, her expression confused. "Sir, we're receiving a request for direct communication from, well, the signature is strange. It appears to be from 3 elder species, but not through official conclave channels." Chen frowned. "The conclave is still paralyzed by the implant revelations. Put it through to my private terminal." In his quarters, Chen accepted the transmission. 3 holograms materialized. Representatives of the Vorsic, the Medusan Collective, and the crystalline thorax. Their appearances seemed deliberately calibrated to unsettle human sensibilities, with angles and movements just wrong enough to trigger unease. Admiral Chen. The Vorsic began without preamble, its form shifting between insectoid and avian states. "We speak outside conclave protocols because the situation has become unprecedented." "The Oath network," Chen guessed. "A capacity we did not predict," the Medusan acknowledged, tentacles writhing. "It suggests humans possess neural architecture significantly different from other species." "We possess integrity," Chen corrected, something apparently in short supply among conclave members. The thorax's crystalline structure refracted light as it responded, the words forming directly in Chen's mind rather than being spoken. "Your righteous anger is justified but unproductive. We 3 species never employed neural implants to circumvent our oaths." "Why contact me now?" Chen asked. "We possess technologies that could end the Xathari threat immediately," the Vorsic stated. "Technologies we have withheld from the General Conclave for reasons that will become apparent." "What's the catch?" Chen's decades of diplomatic experience had taught him that offers too good to be true invariably were. The Medusan's tentacles stilled. 50,000 of your kind must undergo neural integration with our consciousness units. The resulting hybrid beings will reform conclave security with actual, rather than performative, integrity. Chen felt a chill run through him as he understood. You want to merge with human volunteers. The process cannot be reversed, the thorax confirmed. The hybrids would retain human form and much of their original personalities, but gain access to memories spanning millions of years. And you would gain access to our capacity for oath-making, Chen realized. This is assimilation. It is symbiosis, the Vorsic countered. Your species would remain distinct, but together we would create something new. Beings with both ancient wisdom and authentic integrity. Chen ended the transmission without committing to an answer. He needed to consult Earth's Emergency Council. The proposition was too profound, too potentially species-altering to decide unilaterally. When Chen presented the proposal via secure channel to the Council, the reaction was immediate and visceral. Religious leaders condemned it as soul theft. Ethicists warned of extinction by assimilation. Military commanders saw strategic advantage but feared creating a fifth column of alien-influenced hybrids within human society. The debate leaked to public channels despite security protocols. Riots erupted in major cities across Earth and the colonies. Humanity Pure graffiti appeared on government buildings. Counter-protests formed with slogans promoting evolution through humanity. The Exathery, monitoring human communications, intensified their blockade, recognizing the division their actions had caused. Then, from an unexpected source, a transmission reached every human device simultaneously, bypassing all security measures. The signal originated from a cancer hospice in New Tokyo. On screens across human space appeared the withered form of Dr. Ekura Matsuda, once Earth's most celebrated quantum physicist, now in the final stages of terminal cancer. His skeletal body was connected to life support equipment, but his eyes remained sharp and clear. "Fellow humans," he began, his voice thin but steady. "I speak to you as someone with nothing left to lose. The doctors give me 3 weeks at most." He paused, breathing laboriously before continuing. "I've reviewed the elder species proposal. I understand the fears it provokes. But I also understand opportunity." The camera panned to show the hospice ward around him, filled with terminal patients. "Look at us. We are already dying. Let our minds become something new, something that might save us all." His gaze intensified. "I volunteer for neural integration. Who stands with me?" The transmission ended, leaving humanity in stunned silence. Then, gradually, responses began flooding in. First from other hospices and terminal care facilities. Then from elderly veterans of Earth's pre-conclave conflicts. Then from survivors racked with guilt for living while their colonies perished. Within hours, the volunteer list reached 50,000, the exact number requested. Admiral Chen received the list with mixed emotions. The legal and ethical committees worked frantically to establish protocols, ensuring that all volunteers were making informed, uncoerced decisions. Psychological evaluations were conducted. Family counseling was offered. 3 days later, transformation chambers, vast translucent pods filled with luminescent fluid, were installed on a repurposed cruise liner in Earth orbit. The vessel, once dedicated to pleasure voyages among the inner colonies, now housed the most profound biological experiment in human history. Dr. Matsuda was among the first to board. His fragile body moved with extreme care by medical personnel. When asked by a reporter if he feared the unknown transformation ahead, he smiled. "I am a scientist. The unknown has never frightened me. It has only ever fascinated me." For 72 hours, humanity held its collective breath as the volunteers underwent the mysterious procedure. News feeds showed family members maintaining vigil, praying, arguing, or simply staring hollow-eyed at the ship glittering against the darkness. The Exathery fleet commanders observed from a distance, uncertain how to interpret this development, but unwilling to attack the transformation vessel directly, lest they trigger an Oath Network response. Within the chambers, human bodies floated in crystalline suspension, as ancient consciousnesses that had observed the universe for millions of years carefully, delicately intertwined with human neural patterns. The elder species had prepared for this possibility for decades, studying human brain structure and the unique way humans formed oath bonds. What they hadn't prepared for was how the integration would change them, as much as it changed the humans. After 3 days of tense waiting, the first chamber opened. Steam billowed out as the fluid drained away. A figure emerged, standing steadier and straighter than should have been possible for someone who, 3 days earlier, had been unable to rise from a hospice bed. Akira Matsuda, now hosting the consciousness of a 3-million-year-old Vorsic scholar, stepped forward. His physical form appeared unchanged save for his eyes, which reflected light like burnished metal. His cancer had apparently halted, though whether cured or merely suspended remained to be seen. As all 50,000 chambers opened and hybrid beings emerged, humanity watched in fascination and fear. The question on everyone's mind: were these still humans, or had something essential been lost in the transformation? The answer would come sooner than anyone expected, and from a direction no one had predicted. The hybrid beings, 50,000 strong, requested immediate transportation to Conclave headquarters. Their first public act would be to address the still deadlocked assembly of species. Admiral Chen, uncertain of their intentions but bound by pre-transformation agreements, provided the necessary ships. During the journey, Akira Matsuda, now containing the memories and knowledge of a Vorsic scholar who had witnessed the rise and fall of a dozen civilizations, spoke with Chen in the flagship's observation lounge. The stars streaked by as they traveled at faster-than-light speeds, temporal distortions making the view shimmer like disturbed water. "Are you still you?" Chen asked, studying his old colleague's face. Matsuda had been a friend before cancer had forced his retirement from the Physics Institute. "More than I was, and less," Matsuda replied, his voice carrying new harmonics that hadn't been present before. "I remember teaching your daughter's quantum mechanics class 15 years ago. I remember her brilliant questions about field coherence." Chen nodded. That was a very specific memory, unlikely to have been researched or planted. "I also remember," Matsuda continued, observing the formation of the Horsehead Nebula. "I remember diplomatic negotiations that prevented war between the Thorax and the extinct Galani species 800,000 years ago. And these memories feel like yours. They feel like memories, some immediate, some distant, just as your own childhood probably feels somewhat distant to you now." Matsuda turned his metallic eyes to Chen. "But my values remain, my sense of right and wrong, my human ethical framework. And the other hybrids? The same, with individual variations. We are neither fully human or fully elder species. We are something new." Matsuda smiled faintly. "Though we've agreed to call ourselves the Integrity Corps rather than hybrids, it seems more dignified." When they arrived at Conclave headquarters, the chamber was filled to capacity. Every member species had sent representatives, and the massive view screens showed billions watching the proceedings across the galaxy. The Xathari delegation sat apart, heavily guarded after their earlier revelations. Matsuda took the central speaking position, the remaining Corps members arranged in a crescent behind him. Their unified presence created an imposing sight. Human forms standing with perfect stillness, their metallic eyes reflecting the chamber's lights. "We come before the conclave as neither accusers nor saviors," Matsuda began. "We come as witnesses, truth-bearers, mirror holders." The chamber fell silent, even the usual whispered translations ceasing. The joining of human and elder species consciousness has created an unprecedented state of knowledge combined with integrity. We see the past without the distortion of self-interest. We remember actions without the cushion of justification. Matsuda paused, his gaze sweeping the chamber. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He turned not toward the Xathari delegation, but toward the Thorax representatives, the very species that had contributed to his transformation. "The Thorax have manipulated trade routes for 8,000 years, he stated clearly, his voice carrying throughout the chamber. They have deliberately created resource shortages in developing systems to ensure dependency and compliance. Murmurs of confusion spread as the crystalline thorax representatives vibrated with agitation. Before they could respond, another core member stepped forward, a former teacher who now shared consciousness with a Medusan elder. The Medusan Collective has concealed the existence of 17 sentient species in the galactic core, she announced. They feared competition and cultural contamination, so they quarantined entire systems, preventing first contact and technological development. One by one, the core members came forward, exposing millennia of corruption, manipulation, and duplicity. Not just from the Xathari, who had been caught and exposed already, but from every species, including the 3 elder races who had initiated the transformation. The conclave erupted into chaos. Accusations flew. Defensive counterarguments were shouted. Some delegates stormed out. Others demanded immediate sanctions. Matsuda raised his hands, and gradually the chamber quieted again. We could have hidden this knowledge out of loyalty to our non-human aspects, he continued amid the disruption. Instead, we choose to demonstrate that integrity is not a trait humans monopolize. It is a choice any conscious being can make. He turned to the Xathari delegation, who had watched the proceedings with growing amazement as attention shifted away from their own violations. Your attack on human colonies was a strategic error born of fear, Matsuda told them. You feared that genuine Oathkeepers would expose your deceptions. You were right to fear that, but wrong to believe conflict was the only possible outcome. The session dissolved into unprecedented disorder as delegations huddled in frantic discussion. The conclave structure, built on the assumption that oath crystals ensured compliance, was crumbling beneath the weight of exposed reality. As news of the revelations spread, something unexpected happened across human colonies. Civilians began leaving offerings at the doorsteps of known Xathari sympathizers and businesses, not threats, but food, medical supplies, and written invitations to dialogue. The hybrids had revealed corruption among their own elder species components rather than focusing solely on enemy malfeasance, demonstrating that integrity meant holding allies and enemies to the same standard. What happens now? Admiral Chen asked Matsuda as they departed the chamber. Chaos, temporarily, Matsuda admitted. Then, we hope, rebuilding on a foundation of actual rather than performative integrity. And the Xathari fleet still blockading our colonies. They will withdraw within 48 hours, Matsuda said with certainty. Their strategic advantage depended on conclave and action. That advantage no longer exists. He was right. As the revelations destabilized the political order, the Xathari High Command ordered a strategic retreat, unwilling to continue a conflict against humans while potentially facing sanctions from multiple fronts. The blockade lifted, allowing supplies to reach struggling colonies. But in the vacuum of traditional authority, new dangers would soon emerge that would make the Xathari conflict seem simple by comparison. 6 months after the hybrid revelations, the Galaxies settled into an uneasy equilibrium. The conclave remained in perpetual special session, rewriting foundational treaties to address the exposed deceptions. The Xathari had withdrawn to their core systems, their military ambitions temporarily checked by the combined scrutiny of the other powers. On the outer colony of Proxima Centauri, Dr. Maya Chen, Admiral Chen's daughter, and a neuropsychologist specializing in xenobiology, received her first patient of the day. The young colonist sat across from her, hands trembling. "They're in the walls," he whispered, eyes darting to the corners of Maya's office. "They watch us when we sleep. They feed on our dreams." Maya noted the symptoms carefully. The man showed no signs of common hallucinogens or known pathogens. Yet this was her 17th patient this week with nearly identical delusions. By the end of the month, over 300 colonists reported similar experiences. Then came the violence. Neighbors attacking neighbors, claiming they were hollowed out or inhabited. Residential sectors descended into chaos before colonial security could restore order. Most disturbing were the final stages. Affected individuals eventually became catatonic, responsive to physical stimuli, but showing no higher brain functions. Their scans revealed normal activity, yet they remained unresponsive, as if the conscious mind had simply vanished. Similar outbreaks occurred simultaneously on non-human worlds near the galactic rim. The Medusan colony on Ta Ceti reported thousands of cases. A Xathari mining outpost went completely silent. All 10,000 workers found catatonic by a supply ship. Maya sent her findings to both Earth authorities and the Integrity Corps. Within days, a team of hybrids arrived, led by Dr. Matsuda. They insisted on examining patients without technological assistance, relying instead on direct observation. "I can see them," Matsuda said after examining a catatonic patient, his metallic eyes tracking something invisible to Maya. "They're still here, feeding." The hybrid team revealed their discovery to a joint human conclave task force. Entities composed of pure psychic energy were infiltrating populated areas, feeding on conscious thought, and leaving empty husks behind. These void heralds, as the hybrids named them, could only be perceived by beings with neural integrity. Oathbreakers and those with neural implants remained completely blind to them. "They've always existed in the spaces between stars," explained a hybrid with thorax memories. "But something has driven them into populated systems in unprecedented numbers." The heralds targeted the Xathari homeworlds with particular ferocity, perhaps attracted to their highly technological but oath-compromised neural structures. Within weeks, major Xathari cities reported pandemic levels of catatonia, their medical systems overwhelmed. Admiral Chen, now 80 and kept alive by military-grade medical implants, called an emergency summit on Luna. Representatives from all conclave species attended, along with the Integrity Corps leadership. "The Void Heralds don't distinguish between recent enemies and allies," Chen began, his voice still commanding despite his age. "They're an existential threat to all conscious life." He displayed footage from Xathari worlds, streets filled with immobile citizens, children collapsing mid-stride as invisible entities fed on their thoughts. The Xathari ambassador, once arrogant, now watched in undisguised horror. "We propose sharing humanity's unique oath-taking neural patterns with all species," Chen continued, "including the Xathari." The chamber erupted. The hybrid leadership objected first. They had calculated that protecting former enemies would cost millions of human lives in resources diverted from defense of their own colonies. Many humans demanded the Xathari face extinction as karmic justice for their earlier attacks. "They slaughtered millions of our people," a colonial representative shouted. "Let them reap what they've sown." The debate turned vicious until Chen raised his hand for silence. "I received this transmission an hour ago," he said quietly. The main screen activated, showing a residential area in the Argentina colony. Thousands of humans had formed a circle around a temporary settlement of Xathari refugees, each human wearing a crystal fragment. As the camera zoomed in, faint distortions could be seen rebounding from the human circle. Void heralds, visible only because of the oath crystals, unable to penetrate the psychic barrier. "These colonists lost family in the Xathari attacks," Chen said. "Yet they choose to protect the vulnerable, regardless of species." He turned to the Xathari ambassador. "Integrity isn't just keeping your word. It's deciding what kind of universe you want to create." The summit ultimately approved Chen's proposal, though with significant modifications from the Integrity Corps. Distribution of oath-taking neural templates would be accompanied by training in the ethical frameworks that made human oath-keeping effective. Simply replicating the neurological pattern wouldn't work without the corresponding moral development. The Xathari, desperate as herald attacks intensified, agreed to the conditions. Their representatives would undergo a modified version of oath crystal bonding, supervised by human specialists and Integrity Corps members. As the summit concluded, Dr. Maya Chen approached her father. "The heralds are getting stronger," she reported. "Each mind they consume seems to increase their capabilities. They're learning to coordinate attacks, target power systems, disrupt communications. How long until the oath templates can be distributed? Chen asked. Months at minimum. The process can't be rushed without risking psychological damage. Chen nodded grimly. Then we focus on evacuation and containment. Establish safe zones with oath-bound humans creating defensive perimeters. Neither mentioned the obvious limitation. There weren't enough oath-bound humans to protect every vulnerable population. Trade decisions would be necessary, with all their accompanying moral burdens. As Maya left the summit chamber, her communicator signaled an emergency update. She accessed the report and froze in disbelief. The Void Heralds, seemingly intelligent and adaptive, had identified Earth as the source of resistance. Their armada, ships piloted by mind-controlled beings of various species, had changed course. They were no longer attacking random colonies. They were heading directly for the cradle of humanity. For the first time, Maya understood viscerally what her father had taught her since childhood. An oath of protection wasn't just words. It was a commitment to stand against impossible odds when the moment demanded. That moment had arrived. The Void Herald Armada approached Earth's defensive perimeter, a silent flotilla of commandeered vessels piloted by mind-empty crews. Military satellites captured unsettling footage, navigators staring with vacant eyes, engineers moving with puppet-like jerks, all biological functions maintained while consciousness had been hollowed out. Earth's defense grid locked onto the approaching vessels, but Admiral Chen ordered weapons powered down. "Those aren't enemies," he said wearily, looking at the hollow-eyed crews visible on the monitors. "They're hostages." The Joint Species Defense Council, hastily assembled in Geneva, debated options with increasing desperation. Integrity Corps members could see the heralds, but their abilities to affect the entities remained limited. Oath-bound humans could create defensive perimeters, but not at the scale needed to protect an entire planet. "The heralds are evolving," a Medusan scientist reported. "They've learned to use technology by manipulating their hosts. They're communicating with each other across vast distances without detectable signals." As the council session stretched into its third day without viable solutions, an unexpected message reached Admiral Chen's secure terminal. The sender identification simply read, Reyes E. Alina Reyes, the original oath-taker, now 103 years old and living in seclusion in the New Zealand Highlands, requested immediate transport to Conclave headquarters. Her message contained no explanation, only a priority authorization code that hadn't been used in 5 decades. Chen dispatched his fastest courier ship without hesitation. When Alina arrived at Conclave headquarters 12 hours later, those who remembered the strong-willed commander who had sworn humanity's 1,000-year oath barely recognized her. Age and the long-term effects of crystal bonding had left her nearly translucent, her veins tracing luminous patterns beneath paper-thin skin. She walked with the assistance of an exoskeleton frame, but her eyes remained sharp and clear. She demanded an immediate audience with the Conclave elders and specifically requested access to the original sacred oath crystal, a request the Conclave could not legally deny an oathkeeper in good standing. In the crystal chamber, deep beneath the Conclave's public halls, Alina faced the assembled representatives of the remaining free species. The crystal itself rested on a pedestal at the chamber's center, its facets reflecting light in mesmerizing patterns. "For 53 years," she began, her voice barely audible, "I have carried the neural bond of humanity's oath. What none of you know is that the crystal has been slowly transforming me." She removed her outer garment, revealing skin that had become semi-transparent. Beneath it, her nervous system glowed with faint crystalline traces that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. "I am already half energy," she explained. The crystal recognized something in human neural architecture that was compatible with its own structure. "It's been gradually converting my biological systems to a crystalline matrix." The assembled representatives murmured in shock. Nothing in the long history of oath crystals had suggested such a transformation was possible. "What are you proposing?" the Vorsic elder asked. "I will use myself as a conduit for all oath-bound human consciousness," Alina stated plainly. creating a psychic beacon powerful enough to disrupt the Herald's control. The thorax representative's crystalline structure vibrated in alarm. Such a channeling would complete your transformation instantly. Your physical form would be destroyed. I'm aware, Alina replied calmly. As the representatives debated the ethical and practical implications, urgent messages arrived from Earth Defense Command. The Herald ships had entered the outer solar system, bypassing Jupiter's orbital defense platforms without engaging. Their trajectory suggested simultaneous strikes on multiple Earth population centers within hours. While the debate continued, Alina approached Admiral Chen privately. "Jui," she said, using his given name for the first time in decades, "I need your help to make this happen quickly." Chen studied the woman who had defined humanity's place in the galaxy, the commander he had served as a young translator so many years ago. "You're certain?" he asked quietly. "I swore a 1,000-year oath," she replied. "I intend to keep it, just in a different form." Chen nodded once, then turned to the Conclave representatives. "Earth is under imminent attack. Commander Reyes has invoked Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha, which allows any oath-bound human to access the crystal in planetary defense situations. It was a creative interpretation of Conclave law, but none dared challenge it as reports of the Herald advance continued to arrive. The crystal was quickly transferred to a shielded chamber designed for high-energy experiments. Alina stood alone before it, her exoskeleton removed, supported only by her own failing strength. "Open a channel to all oath-bound humans," she instructed the communications officer. When the connection was established, Alina addressed humanity one final time. "I am Alina Reyes. 53 years ago, I bound our species to an oath of integrity. Today, I ask you to lend me your strength." Her transparent hands reached for the crystal. "Focus on our shared promise. To protect, to stand firm, to keep our word across generations." As she spoke, oath-bound humans everywhere felt a gentle tug on their consciousness, a sensation like a distant voice calling their name. From Earth to the farthest colonies, 1.7 million humans closed their eyes in silent assent, allowing their oath energy to flow toward the focal point Alina had created. With trembling hands, she embraced the sacred oath crystal. The contact initiated a cascade of transformative energy. The crystal flared with impossible brightness as Alina's physical body began to dissolve into motes of light that spiraled into the artifact. "Thank you," her voice whispered through the oath network, no longer produced by physical vocal cords but by pure energy, "for trusting me to keep our promise." The crystal's glow intensified until observers had to shield their eyes. When they could look again, Alina's physical form had vanished completely. The crystal itself had transformed, now suspended in midair, pulsing with light in the exact rhythm of a human heartbeat. Simultaneously, every controlled ship in Earth orbit suddenly went dark, then reignited with their crews screaming in confused liberation. The Void Heralds, visible only to the hybrids and oath-bound humans, could be seen fleeing from Earth's vicinity, their form states disrupted by whatever Alina had become. The transformation had created a psychic beacon that shredded the Herald's control over their biological hosts, while simultaneously driving the entities themselves back into the spaces between stars. Not destroyed, but displaced and diminished. In the aftermath, as liberated ships were guided to medical facilities and the immediate threat subsided, Admiral Chen stood alone before the transformed crystal. He reached out one weathered hand, not quite touching its surface. "Was this your plan all along, Alina?" he whispered. "Is this why you made an oath that would last far beyond your natural lifespan?" The crystal pulsed once in response, a pattern that somehow conveyed meaning without words, not a plan, a possibility, a promise kept in an unexpected way. Chen nodded, understanding in some deep, intuitive way that transcended rational explanation. "Rest well, Commander," he said softly. "We'll take it from here." But as he turned to leave, the crystal pulsed again, more insistently. Chen paused, listening with more than his ears to what Alina had become. Not rest, transformation, beginning, not ending. The energy that had been Elena Reyes was expanding through the crystal matrix, becoming something that had never existed before in the universe, a bridge between oath energy and physical reality, between promise and manifestation. The true implications would not become clear for days, but those sensitive to the oath network already felt the change, a new dimension opening in their awareness, a sense of connection not just to other oath keepers, but to something vaster and more profound. The universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting. In the aftermath of what became known as the Illumination, the sacred oath crystal transformed into something unprecedented. A swirling nebula of energy contained within a perfect geometric structure, with Elena's consciousness as its foundation. The crystal no longer rested on its pedestal, but hovered a few centimeters above it, rotating slowly on multiple axes simultaneously, defying fundamental physics. Conclave scientists from a dozen species studied the phenomenon without reaching consensus. Some called it a new form of artificial intelligence, others, a quantum consciousness. The Integrity Core members, with their hybrid understanding, came closest to the truth when they named it the Integrity Nexus, a focal point where oath energy manifested in physical form. 3 weeks after the transformation, the first remarkable property of the Nexus was discovered accidentally. A young Medusan diplomat, participating in the research team, approached the Nexus in a state of genuine curiosity. As he extended his sensory tentacles toward the rotating crystal, energy tendrils reached out in return, making contact. The Medusan staggered back, overwhelmed. "I felt her," he reported when he recovered. "Not just her thoughts, but her integrity. Like a template overlaid on my consciousness, showing what honest communication truly means." Further controlled experiments confirmed that anyone who approached with honest intent could connect to the Nexus, experiencing perfect communication, unmarred by deception or misunderstanding. The connection wasn't telepathy in the conventional sense. It didn't transmit specific thoughts or memories. Rather, it created a shared framework of integrity that prevented self-deception and dishonesty while connected. The first non-humans to formally request connection to the network were, surprisingly, the Xathari. Their civilization, humbled by near extinction at the hands of the Void Heralds, sent a delegation led by a new ambassador. "We were wrong about strength," he declared in a public ceremony before approaching the Nexus. He removed his neural implants publicly, placing them in a recycling receptacle. True strength lies not in deception, but in the courage to be honest, especially when it's difficult. When he connected to the Nexus, tears streamed down his scaled face, the first time any human had observed Xathari emotional display. "We have been so alone," he whispered, "even among ourselves. Always calculating, always performing, never truly connecting." Over the following decade, species after species joined the network, each contributing unique perspectives while maintaining their cultural identity. The Nexus didn't force uniformity of thought, only clarity of communication and honesty of intent. Neural implants and other oath circumvention technologies were gradually abandoned, rendered obsolete by the superior connections possible through the Nexus. Specialized Nexus chambers were constructed on major worlds throughout conclave space, each containing a small fragment from the original, all quantum entangled with Elena's consciousness at the center. These chambers became neutral ground for diplomatic negotiations, scientific collaboration, and cultural exchange, places where species who had mistrusted each other for millennia could interact without barriers. The Void Heralds, though driven back, were not destroyed. Occasional incursions still occurred in remote systems, but the coordinated response through the Nexus-connected civilizations prevented the devastating outbreaks of the past. Some xenobiologists theorized that the Heralds had always been part of the natural ecosystem of consciousness in the galaxy, predators who had evolved to cull minds disconnected from communal integrity. 5 years after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Chen, now on his deathbed at 85, made a final journey to the transformed Conclave headquarters. His daughter Maya accompanied him, supporting his frail form as they entered the original Nexus chamber. As Chen approached the swirling energies, he felt Alina's presence immediately, not as a ghost or memory, but as a continuing consciousness that had transcended its original form. "Did you know this would happen?" he asked the crystalline matrix. "That our greatest weapon would be our unwillingness to lie?" The response came not in words, but in pure concept, spreading through his consciousness with perfect clarity. Integrity was never meant to be a weapon. It was always meant to be a bridge. Chen smiled, understanding at last the true significance of humanity's contribution to galactic civilization. It wasn't faster ships or devastating weapons that had secured their place among the stars. It was the radical notion that keeping one's word wasn't just a personal virtue, but the foundation of meaningful civilization. "I'm tired, Alina," he confessed, knowing she would understand in ways no one else could. His accomplishments were legendary: admiral, diplomat, leader through multiple crises, but the weight of decisions made, lives risked and lost, pressed heavily on him at the end. The Nexus pulsed in response. "Rest now. Others will carry the oath forward." Chen closed his eyes, feeling a peace he hadn't known in decades. "I think I'm ready to join you," he whispered. But the Nexus responded with gentle correction: "Not join. Continue differently. The path goes on." When Chen died 3 days later, his consciousness did not join the Nexus as some had speculated it might. Alina's transformation had been unique, the result of decades of crystal bonding, and her position as the original oath-taker. But his legacy continued in other ways, through the institutions he had built, the treaties he had negotiated, and most importantly, through the example he had set of leadership with integrity. As the Galactic Charter was rewritten, its preamble bore words attributed to both Alina Reyes and the first Satheri to join the Nexus. "Across the infinite dark between stars, only our promises truly bind us together." Humanity's legacy wasn't technological superiority or military might, but something both simpler and more profound. They taught a galaxy that civilization begins with keeping your word, no matter the cost, and that promises made freely are stronger than any force in the universe. The Nexus continued to evolve over subsequent decades, developing new properties as more minds connected with it. Remote communication between Nexus chambers became possible for those who had established a strong connection pattern. Collaborative problem-solving through the network led to technological breakthroughs that benefited all connected species. Most significantly, the hybrid integrity core discovered that children born to oath-bound parents showed natural neural patterns compatible with Nexus connection, suggesting an epigenetic transfer of integrity capacity. These children grew up with an intuitive understanding of oath-keeping that their ancestors had developed through conscious choice. 1,000 years after Commander Alina Reyes swore humanity's original oath, her transformed consciousness remained at the heart of a galactic civilization founded on integrity. The oath had been kept, though in a way no one could have predicted. Countless stars had been born and died. Species had evolved and changed, but the principle remained constant. A promise made is a debt unpaid, and humanity had taught the stars how to keep their word. In the end, humanity's greatest contribution wasn't what they knew or what they built. It was who they chose to be.